What's happening in Iraq is much more than a civil war. It's a full-blown foreign policy crisis, which, like almost anything else that happens in the Middle East, threatens to spill across more borders and bring world powers to bear. The standard finger-pointing is also already here, seemingly blaming and prevent further disaster. Buckle up, we're going in. Welcome to Midpoint, a highly decorated veteran of 21 years, Congressional District seat in Oklahoma. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Russell joins us today. Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, what I like to say to our military, thank you again for your service.
Well, thank you for having me on.
The thing that is said right up front that I think we have to react to is this notion that America may have to go into partnership with Iran or talk to the Iranians. What I hear from a lot of people off camera, friends that I talk to, is we already know we can't trust them, and it's been a long history of not trusting them, and they don't like Americans to begin with. How can we even think for a moment of getting in bed with the Iranians?
It's staggering to think that is our options that we're actually entertaining. We must remember that the Mahdi army and the Badr troops that are gaining support from the Iranians already, these were the very people that brought the roadside bombs, the EFPs they called them, that were so powerful. They were made in Iran. They killed hundreds, if not even a couple of thousand of American soldiers in Iraq. I find it staggering that we are so dazed in what our Iraq policy should be that we would allow the Iranians to come in and influence the region. That is not good for stability of the region.
Is it not possible that if indeed we get involved and the Iranians say, welcome in America, we'd love to get your help because we need this to stabilize the Middle East, that at the end of the day, they're just playing the Americans? They're going to use us for whatever they can to stabilize as much as they can and then simply just go right back to what they've done before and potentially make us look foolish again.
I think what the president needs to do is he needs to tell the Iranians, we appreciate your interest in the safety of the Iraqi people. You're welcome to send food. You're welcome to send medical supplies. We appreciate that. It'll be received at the border. And then we go to Maliki and we tell him, look, if you're going to have our support, if you're going to have our intelligence, if you're going to have our airstrikes, if you're going to have our long-term commitment, you must reach out to the Sunni Arabs. You must reach out to the Kurds. You put this back together so we don't get a jihadist state or some odd entity in the middle of Iraqi territory. The United States can readily do this, and the president needs to lead.
We are seeing video right now of some of the brutality, the alleged brutality that has come through from Iraq. We are seeing pictures, courtesy of the New York Times and others, that show Iraqi civilians and military being paraded, put into vehicles and then taken to a ditch and then shot one at a time. There are those who say, there are those who cringe at this brutality. Why would anyone cringe at this? Is this not what we have been led to expect from radical extremists such as this in the first place? This is almost a daily occurrence from what we see, correct?
Well, I think that you phrased it correctly, that this is the radical extremists that are causing this. They rule by fear, hence terrorism. But look, the Iraqi people do not want this. They have a long secular tradition. They're not ones that want a jihadist movement or government either on the Shia Arab side or the Sunni Arab side. The Iraqi people, they don't have their women walking around in burqas or hijabs. I mean, you'll see a little of that, but not much. 5% of them are university graduates. They're very educated. They have capacity to put this together. But what we're seeing is an incompetent prime minister backed by a lethargic and disinterested United States that is allowing handfuls and a few hundreds of these insurgents to dust up a very, very big problem. And if we don't act quickly, they could turn this into a sectarian fight between Arab Shia and Arab Sunni, with the Kurds caught in the vortex and with all of the Middle East in a tailspin.
Now, President Obama, in his statement last week, and he has several times, so have some of his officials, they have taken Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki to task, and they basically indicated that he has to get his act together governmentally. But let's remember something here. Within 24 hours of the troops' original departure, he issued an arrest warrant for the Sunni vice president, which meant this is not someone who seemingly wants to create a conjoined state, if you will. This is somebody who simply wants to go ahead and inflict his own version of what should be right and what should be wrong in Iraq on his own people, and doesn't look to be trying to create any sort of togetherness, if you will. I'm not going to sing Kumbaya here, but why are we at any time going to lead ourselves to believe that as long as al-Maliki is in power, that we can get something done with him? It would seem that that is impossible, and that has to be almost off the table.
Well, and positions. Maliki, on the other hand, has gradually, he tried to portray himself as being inclusive, but when he had his re-election secured, now we see the problem. And the Sunni Arabs knew this. That's why they became very restive in the cities of Fallujah and other places right around the time of the election. Maliki realized the error of his ways, reached out to the tribal leaders and the tribal police and others. Look, he can do this again. He needs to go to these people. He needs to rely on the heavily organized tribal networks that characterize the Sunni Arab North. They are still very tribal. Work with these. Tell them, look, we know we don't need a jihadist regime. We all agree on that. So at the end of this, if we will secure ourselves and take a stand here, we will share power in proportion with the positions in Parliament. We will share power with cabinet posts, and then we need to move forward to have an Iraq rather than some sectarian violence. And the other issue that you see with Maliki is that not only is he not able to contain or control extremists in the Sunni Arab population, but even in his own Shia Arab population. We have the Badr Corps that is now resurging under al-Sistani. We also see the Mahdi Army under Muqtada al-Sadr, who's changed the name of this entity. But these are people that do not want stability. They do not want Maliki. They want their own power. The United States has to step in and guide and help and lead. The consequence, if we do not, you get some type of jihadist entity that connects dots and cities between eastern Syria and western northern Iraq. It borders NATO allies. You've got all of the instability with our longstanding partners there. And if we do nothing, the cost is going to be immeasurably more.
I think the point that a lot of Americans would be asking then is, if we do nothing, agreed. However, you just went through and discussed a lot of the different factions here and the tribal factions here. That's what has run these countries for generations, for decades, for centuries now in many ways. The biggest question I hear people asking is, if we're going to go in and back somebody, whom do we trust? Because it doesn't seem like there's anybody there who we can actually trust to make promises, to move forward, and to actually stay with any agreements they make with the United States or anybody else for that matter.
Well, there's where the United States bears the greatest responsibility, because after every conflict resolution, whether it have been the Philippines or in Japan or in Germany or South Korea, when we resolve conflicts, we have a status of forces, we leave a contingent of troops, we work with the nascent governments, we show them commitment, we show them the commitment economically and diplomatically, along with the long-standing partners, to get them set up on trade and any number of other things. And before we write the Iraqi people off and say, well, these people, they don't care. Well, you could have said that about Japanese, you could have said that about Koreans, all of that. And we can't go there. Look, yes, there are disparate factional groups, but the reason that there are is that they are not allowed to engage in the political process. If they can't further their voice politically, they're going to further it with an AK-47.
Lieutenant Colonel, I'm going to put you here with about a minute left. You're sitting across the table from President Barack Obama, and you have 1 minute to tell him, in your experience, having been there, knowing what goes on the ground, exactly what smartly needs to be done. What would that be?
It would show immediate commitment, send in envoys, go to Iraq, work with Maliki, have negotiations with these tribal leaders, start rallying them together, Kurds, Sunni Arabs, others, rally them, show commitment that the United States is not disinterested, that we haven't forgotten the Iraqi people. 25 million Iraqi people do not want this future. But the president is trying to get completely disengaged in ending any notion of war in Iraq. Instead, he likely will end Iraq through his lethargy.
Lieutenant Colonel Steve Russell, you have been there, and again, we thank you for your service. We thank you for your time. We will undoubtedly be talking again. Thank you again very much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we have heard a lot of the differing opinions, and all day long we are going to hear from them, because Iraq is the key today to the news, and we're going to have a lot of people discussing that here today. But as we always do here on Newsmax, on Midpoint, the different shows, we need your input, because America, you're still the ones that put these people into power. So social media is the way to get in touch with us, because we read these social media comments live on here. The question is simply put, we've talked about all the different factions. Whom can we trust? Who should we trust in Iraq? And what should be that next step? Make it a logical next step, because we keep telling people that this is television and news for an intelligent generation. Get a hold of us on Twitter, send us something on email, get to us on Facebook. Let us know exactly what you think, and we will be talking about it here all day long, because this is Newsmax, and this is Midpoint, where every day we question everything.